Hello, alien slaying tubers, and welcome to an announcement video for an upcoming Let's Play on my channel. As you can probably tell by the title and screen on the video right now, if you're paying any attention at all, we're going to be playing XCOM Apocalypse. Now, if you've never heard of this game, it's relatively old, about 20 years, 1990, does it say on the screen? 97, oh look at that, right on the screen. So it's definitely not a new game. It's the third XCOM game, and the last one made by the original team, technically. So this is definitely more of an old school, kind of like a DOS era, early Windows era kind of game, and it's got a lot in common with the very original XCOM, or well, UFO. It's just UFO Defense, whatever they called the original game technically. It's similar to the newer Enemy Within, XCOM 2s and all that, but anyway, it's the one I'm going to play next, and the reasoning for it is I've been kind of had the itch to play some XCOM style games lately, and I tried some XCOM 2, and it just doesn't really scratch my itch. It's, you know, if you've been on the channel long enough, you probably know my feelings on XCOM 2. It's not terrible, but it doesn't quite get me. It's not quite what I want. And I've got a long time to wait. There's, you know, Xenonauts 2 is on the way. There's Phoenix Point. There's a few XCOM-y type games on the way, but I needed something else. And I actually never played this game when it came out back in the 90s. It was another one of those ones that I missed, although I knew about it, and then I never got around to playing it. So this is relatively new for me. That is not to say that this is a blind Let's Play. I have just completed my first campaign on Medium. So I think I know basically what I'm doing. For the Let's Play, I'll be playing on Superhuman because it's actually pretty easy on Medium. I mean, I'm not going to be worrying about going Iron Man, no reloads, although I will, as usual, try to limit that to a sensible strategy. But sometimes there's, well, even just running this thing, sometimes there's glitches and bugs, so once in a while we'll have to reload just from crashes and stuff like that. So I need to be in the habit of saving regularly one way or the other. And, you know, I'm not sure how hard Superhuman will be, so I'm not going to discount my reloading once in a while. Although, keep in mind, if you're familiar with my channel, I'll never be like, oh no, someone got shot, reload. Oh, I missed a shot, reload. Like, that's not how we play. If it happens, it's more like, oh, we lost a mission and now it's game over. I better reload because that's not... I can't handle losing my entire squad. So if you want to see a purely Iron Man, never reload a game, this is probably not the right Let's Play for you. Just getting that out there right away. So for today, the main point of this announcement video is, by the way, this is the game we're going to play. And of course, I'll be accepting viewer names for it. So this is the video. If you want to submit a name to join the team, this is the one to leave it. Character limit, we'll check in just a second, although I think it can be a relatively long name. Let's not have any supercalifragilisticexpialidociouses, though, please. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure you can use whatever you want. And I'll just load it up to show you more. I'm going to cover a bit of a very noob tutorial here in today's episode as well, although we'll save that for the end. So just to let people know, like, let's see, I'll just go back to base quick here, and the soldier screen. So yeah, you can put relatively long names in here. I'm assuming however many characters fit into this little window is probably about the max we'll be able to type in. So just for interest's sake here. Sometimes there's a bit of input lag. Also, I don't know how to type, apparently. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Look at that. PC games, PC Master Race. Oh, yeah, it's 24 characters, so that's pretty good. I hope you guys don't abuse my privilege there. Anyway, so you can give me a name, and I'll put it in here, and you can live or die as you go. There will be... given some deaths and the fact that I like to bring lots of soldiers, there's probably room for easily 50 or 60 names altogether. So don't be shy. Please leave a comment if you plan to watch the videos at all. Then you're welcome to join. And if you die, feel free to resubmit. And if I resurrect you as a secondary character, you can potentially come back. If we really get a lot of requests, we can also name like vehicles and stuff. So we've got, right now I've just got a few vehicles, but you can rename these as well. And you might be able to rename researchers. I actually don't know about that. Maybe not. There's researchers and scientists and stuff with names, but I might not be able to change those ones. It doesn't matter. Between the soldiers, the agents specifically, and the vehicles, there should be lots of stuff. We can rename the bases if people have good suggestions. You know, standard sort of XCOM-y type thing. So anyway, that's pretty much it for the announcement stuff. From here on out, if you're already super familiar with this game, no need to watch the end unless you just want to listen to me talk about stuff. But if you haven't played and you're interested, I'm going to cover some of the basics of how this older game works. Sort of a really as if you've never seen this screen before kind of tutorial. So I'm going to press tab here and show you kind of the city view. I'm not going to go over like the lore of the game or anything, but suffice to say the entire game takes place in one city, unlike most of the XCOM games where you're defending the planet. We're also in the future. I think it's 150 years in the future after XCOM and XCOM Terror from Beneath. So some stuff's happened. We've already fought off a couple alien invasions, but the world's kind of gone to crap. So suffice to say, this is kind of it. There's maybe a couple mega cities left, or maybe this is the last one. And we're still XCOM, and there's new aliens coming, so we're gonna have to deal with it. And in basically the map, it's not actually random. I checked it out. There's a different map for each difficulty, and it gets larger depending on what difficulty you're playing it on. So if you're playing a novice or medium kind of map, it'll be much smaller, so there'll be less buildings and less total area. But it'll be the same every time you play Novice. And if we're playing Superhuman, this is just the map you get. Unless the guides have lied to me, that's how it's supposed to work. So our base, for instance, where are we? Our base right now is in this little warehouse over here. Warehouse 2, technically. And we'll be able to build new bases with this button here in some locations. Warehouses and this lower area it's called the slums. So you can kind of see their crummy, poor people buildings. And then the warehouses are in like the nice new buildings, the nice new area, or prosperous area. So yeah, you can build bases. The bases come with like varied shapes. Like this is a nice rectangular base that's convenient. Sometimes they come with kind of weird layouts. That could be useful. I believe if the base gets attacked, they always come in the access tube, or if you put like a vehicle bay, they can come through that. But like if you didn't build any vehicle bays here, it would only be invaded from this square, and you could put your defenses to the sides of it, and it would be pretty effective for keeping the place safe. So you might think like a nice big rectangular is the best base for building, and it probably fits the most buildings, that's true. But defensibility, sometimes there's other options, and sometimes it's just cheaper too, which is something to think about. Anyway, that's like the city view. I'm going to go over a little bit later, there's a bunch of factions, but just keep in mind every building here, we can go back to normal view. Every building is owned by some company or some faction, and it has a purpose. So if we're doing a mission in there, it's tied to a faction, and there's kind of a different procedural generated map for each building's type. Like Astrodomes will have different maps than flyer factories. But there won't necessarily be a difference between two flyer factories. It's just random with the same sort of assets. You also might notice these little floating pyramid things. There's actually 3 of them on the map. They're the blue triangles on map mode, and that's where the aliens will attack us from most of the time. So they move around, sort of, they teleport around a little bit, and that's, you might want to set up your defenses nearby so we can shoot down UFOs before they drop off some aliens and try to take over your buildings, and they shoot stuff and blow stuff up. So you might want to try to kill them before that happens. But again, I'll get into the factions near the end here. So we're just talking about bases and stuff for the most part. So my first base, the one they gave you, again, they give you a random base. You don't get to choose. I got kind of a sideways S base. Whatever. It's not got a lot of room to expand. I don't really like this one much. Probably when I do the actual first episode, I'll reset it enough times so I get a base that I'm a little bit happier with. This looks kind of annoying to me. It doesn't help against attacks, and it doesn't give me much space to expand, which is kind of lame. So, just a quick overview of some of the buildings. Like, it's really no big deal, but living quarters. You need these things for your agents, your scientists, and your engineers, or else you run out of space, you can't have any more. No big deal. Storeroom, this just holds on to gear, anything. I think even if you equip it onto your soldiers, it takes 1 store space, although I might be wrong on that. But clearly you need enough living quarters and stores to manage your inventory. You generally just need one medical bay unless you're taking a ton of damage. It'll hold up to 10 wounded soldiers, and it'll help them heal faster, which is obviously nice. Training areas are good. If you assign soldiers to the training areas, their stats increase. Just to give you a quick look, you got all your typical XCOM stats. A training area or a gym will increase, I think, accuracy, reaction, speed, stamina, and strength. And I think strength only goes up from training. The other stats will go up from fighting, and bravery is specifically only from fighting. And then you might notice some psi stuff that doesn't go up in a normal gym, that goes up in a psi gym. So, you probably want a couple training areas. I find, especially later on, early on you get a lot of missions, there's not a lot of time for training necessarily, but later on in the game, you can get your soldiers with some pretty amazing stats if they've got enough days training, so that works out pretty well for late game overpowered troops. And then the psi gym is just the same except for psionics, and these 3 stats will be trained, and only those 3 stats in the psi gym. One thing to note is your stats, pretty sure, will only go to triple their original score in the psi gym. So someone who starts with like bad psi attack, that's a level 6 points of psi attack, even if we put them in the psi gym for a year, it'll only ever get to 18, which is not really good enough to do anything. So that's something to think about before you say, I want a psi trooper, because this is not good enough, basically. Also, psionics, we'll talk about it. It's not that great in this game, unfortunately. So we've got training areas, we've got security stations. These guys give you, it's kind of like if you're doing a base defense, it gives you some turrets that shoot at alien invaders, or could be human invaders also as well, possibly. I actually haven't had great success with them because my base gets attacked regularly enough, but I don't know. I have never designed a base smartly enough in my first run to actually have them funnel through the security station. I'd always build a security station like over here, not knowing what was going on, and then the aliens would, the attackers would spawn somewhere else and they would just do nothing. But maybe we'll make more use of it in Superhuman for the Let's Play. The vehicle repair bay, you actually don't need a vehicle repair bay to have vehicles and launch them, but you do need it to repair them, I believe. If I'm wrong, we'll find out eventually, or someone will correct it in the comments, hopefully. But I'm pretty sure you don't actually need these to launch. Like, in a lot of the XCOM games, you need to build hangars and stuff, or like Xenonauts has stuff like that, and the old XCOM had the old 2x2 hangars. You don't really have this is just for repairing, I'm pretty sure, and it's just one at a time. So if you have a big fleet of vehicles and you want to repair them all up, you actually need quite a few of these, so that's kind of the thing. Then you got different types of research, so we've got it split between biochemistry and quantum physics. So you need two different types of research buildings, and there will eventually be upgrades that are 2x2 for those, which is why this is a bad base for research, because there's nowhere to expand a larger building. There's alien containment. You probably just need one of these, although it says capacity 20. Some aliens are like base 2, base 3, base 5, base 10 size, so you might only be able to fit 1 or 2 of the larger aliens in something like this. So you might want 2 of them, maybe, but I don't have a lot of room here, so obviously that wouldn't work too well. And then there's the workshop. That's pretty standard. That's where we'll assign engineers to build stuff. There's, again, a larger workshop, and you'll need that to build actual aircraft later on. We can't do that in a small workshop, for instance. That's all the buildings. There's a couple more, like I said, there's some upgrades to them, but it's not that complicated. There's a bit of base layout design, but it's just simple enough, right? You guys know how that works. We'll go through some of the base options in a second. I want to sort of cover the menu, like the main menu first. So this is all the stuff that's in base. Now, most of these buttons are actually just shortcuts. So this is your vehicle tab, and this will show you all of your current vehicles, no matter where they are. If they're inaccessible, they'll be crossed out, but you can kind of click on them, all the stuff. I'll go through some of the information they show on screen here. So you can see what weapons are equipped on them. Once we go to the base view, I'll show you how you change equipment, but suffice to say, you can disable them so you can fly them around and they won't shoot at stuff. Sometimes there's enemy vehicles like this car over here, and if you had an airship, or whatever these are called, interceptors, near one of these, they would start shooting at it, which is okay. It's an enemy. We'll talk about the Cult of Sirius later. The problem is you're likely to shoot up a bunch of the city and destroy a bunch of roads and buildings and stuff. And it's fine if the police do it. it's not so fine if you do it and destroy a bunch of city stuff. People tend to get a little bit cranky at you. So you gotta be careful about flying around with weapons enabled, basically. It's fine to shoot down UFOs, and if the city takes a little damage, it's it's worth it. But destroying cultist cars is probably not a good plan for long-term money income stuff. There's a couple little options here. This is their aggressiveness selection. This is the most aggressive down to basically evade. Then there's defensive and standard. This sort of controls the AI and how close your ships will get to an enemy. So depending on the weapons you've got equipped, sometimes you might have a long-range missile weapon, and you could definitely put them on defensive, and they'd stay kind of further away from the UFO and launch attacks from further away. And then evasive, I think, is straight up tries to avoid enemies, so you wouldn't want to do that for killing UFOs, unless you're damaged. That's the little health bar I didn't mention, but I'm sure you figured it out. So that's the aggressiveness. A lot of times I just leave it on the max, but unless you're using short-range weapons, it's probably not necessary. I could probably leave it to standard or defensive for a lot of my different types of craft. The next one is your vehicle height. It's the altitude your vehicles will travel at, unless it's a road vehicle, which are terrible and we'll never use because roads are not safe. But basically everything we use that flies, like, why don't I just send one of these guys out? There we go. Launch tubes. So we've got ourselves, this is our Valkyrie Interceptor, I believe is the name of it. Valkyrie Interceptor. So if you set it to higher, I think it moves a little bit quicker, or at least it doesn't get interrupted by buildings the same. I think it's possible the travel speed is the same, but if you're flying low, you have to go around buildings because you're low enough that you sort of run into them, or you have to go around them, that is. The thing is, and I did do a little bit of reading about this because I didn't understand it well enough for my first playthrough. It's actually kind of recommended to play at low or medium, because if you're fighting against a UFO, let's imagine the UFOs are all at kind of medium high, which is probably, they all fly about the same height, which is probably somewhere around something like this at level 3 height. If you're below them, when you're firing your weapons, you're shooting kind of upwards. It's hard to see on an isometric map, but you shoot more upwards-y, which means if you miss the UFO, chances are your bullets just fly off into the sky. But if you're in ultra-high mode, which understandably might be faster, if you miss your UFO, you hit the ground or a building. And as I've kind of mentioned previously, that's not great. The faction, like if I shot this building, well, okay, that's a bad example. I don't care about them very much. But if Cyberweb gets shot, if I shot that building, Cyberweb would get angry with me, and if their relations go down, then they'll stop doing business with us, and if they really hate us, they'll actually launch attacks at us. So destroying a lot of their buildings is bad for relations, and in the big picture, it also costs money to repair by somebody, which can affect your income levels eventually, although it gets a little bit complicated how that all works out. But suffice to say, if you keep blowing up the city, eventually there's not as much money going around, jobs for the government and everything to pay people, and they're always spending money on infrastructure. They're not going to give XCOM as much money, so that's kind of the point. So then we've got those bars. This button is just go to a building and dock with it, basically. There's always, every building has some kind of landing tube. I guess that's the wrong one, it's hiding back here. You'll have to land there to engage in missions or hide from aliens. If your ship is really wounded, you could hide in there, and unless the building gets destroyed, your ship is fine. But if they destroy the building, you probably die anyway. And then this is just normal go-to move. It's simple enough. We've got a quick return to base button. We've got equip vehicles. This doesn't do much when you're out flying around, because you can't access, like this one's crossed out because it's out flying around, so you can't change equipment. But it's mostly just a shortcut to your base equip. So if you've got a vehicle in base and you don't want to go through the normal base menu, you can just quickly go here if you want. It's just a shortcut. And this is the loadout for moving soldiers around. I've got a bunch of soldiers in a base. The quickest way I found is click and drag to select a bunch, or specifically click one at a time if you're boring. Then we can use click and drag to move them onto something that has capacity. Storm Dog can hold 4, for instance. Phoenix Hovercar can hold 4. You can also click the vehicles to unselect or select all, which is nice. I wish the base did that. There's some user interface things that these old games don't cover quite as well as newer games might be better at. But that's a couple useful things there. This will just be how we move soldiers around to do missions. Simple enough, right? You can also get a shortcut to the equip agent screen from there, and a shortcut to the equip vehicle screen. But there's just lots of shortcuts. It's better for this kind of stuff than the original XCOM game. It's nice to see that they've made some things a lot easier to do, but it's also, 20 years old. We're like, oh yeah, I can see where games in the last 10 years would make some of this stuff a lot easier. There'd be like a way to select everything from here that I haven't found a shortcut for, or you press like a keyboard command. Like there might be, I don't know all the keyboard commands, but there might be like an All or S button that just selects everything. I don't know stuff that well for this game. This is your attack button. So generally you'll select, you can also like hold control here and select a whole bunch of units, and then control click an enemy, or send everybody to a building. And then if you right click, you'll unselect them. So it took me a while to figure that out, but right click unselects from all, and control click, adds them to the group. I don't think you can have like control groups like some things, but like you can select individual craft, but they're still all, you can kind of see that orange border, they're still all selected ultimately. This guy wasn't, but then now none of them are selected. I've had times where they all got stuck selected like this, and I didn't have anyone else to select. I didn't know the right click thing at that point. So once they're all selected, they're kind of in a group together, and I was stuck just moving them all as a group for a couple hours till I figured out, oh, you can just do that. Technically, you can also reload the game, but that's boring. And then you can also attack buildings, although I wouldn't recommend that. This is, you'll fly around shooting buildings. People tend to get really angry at you, and I think they generally just rebuild them anyway, so unless you're planning on just carpet bombing the city, this button won't get used too often. Alright, I gotta pick up the pace here. I got lots to cover and don't want to take all day. This is just a shortcut to all your soldiers, although it might be the only way to send them training, but everything else is just shortcuts. You can go to what building they're in, or... oh, you can tell them to move to a building. Okay, I see. I've never actually used that. I guess the idea is if you don't have a transport vehicle, you could tell them to take... there's these are like people mover tubes. They're tram. I don't think they're trams actually, but you could use that, or they could take a taxi cab across the roads to get somewhere. I don't think that's a great idea, but if there's a use for it, maybe there's a good use for it. And then return home would work probably the same as the vehicle tab. I don't really use this tab much. I use it to select people and send them training, or disable training, or side training. And then you can also shortcut back to the equip screen. So, it's handy that this is all here, but we won't necessarily use all these buttons too often. These next ones are just shortcuts for your researchers. So this is your biochemistry lab. You can see who you've got, if they've been assigned or not, and then you get a shortcut to your research tab. I'll do most of that work on the research tab. Same thing for quantums, or I guess that's engineering, and same thing for quantum. And then this is, it's a UFO button, but it's actually just hostile vehicles. So right now, there's a turbo bike from the Cult of Sirius, an auto taxi. There's lots of Cult of Sirius people, and we're going to do something about that pretty early on in the game. So we'll shut that down as quick as we can. This will be where you'll see the UFOs when they show up, and it's a useful tab because you can look around on the map for red dots, but also right click to jump. Although we see a red dot there, and you can't even see it anyway, but that's just a taxi cab. So red dots on the minimap don't necessarily help you out unless you know it's a UFO for sure, and this one helps. Anyway, this tab is a little bit more complicated. It's organizations. The way I generally use it is these buttons down here are the sorting. So this is like neutral. Most factions are neutral. This is friendly. This is allied. This is unfriendly and hostile. So Cult of Sirius is hostile. If you want to read a little bit about why they're hostile, feel free to have a quick look at it. They're a cult. They like the aliens. We're going to not be friends with them, no matter what. They've got a lot of money, which we're going to do something about pretty quick. If they've got money, they can use it to perform operations and attacks and stuff. So if someone's hostile with you, at the very least, you might want to raid one of their buildings. I didn't really talk about that, but if you click on a building, you can see the owner, what kind of building it is, and then if there's aliens there, you can attack them. If there's no aliens and you click it, people get mad at you. If you don't care about the aliens and you just want to blow stuff up and steal equipment, you go raid. This makes them really mad at you, and then it's just a shortcut to equipping, of course, like all the other buttons that are shortcuts. So if we find like the easiest way to find buildings is you select them with left click here, and they'll be highlighted red, and it'll jump between them if you keep clicking it. So on Superhuman, they've got quite a few buildings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think or 6 actually is another one. I think when I played on medium, there was 4 Cult of Sirius buildings. I expect there's just everyone gets a couple extra buildings on the larger map. That makes sense to me. Other important factions that, like, I don't want to go through all of them even close, but Megapol is like the police, and they'll probably be friendly with you in general because you're killing aliens and you're defending the city. So they're likely to stay your friends. And the government is basically your friend, or you kind of lose the game, or at least you lose your income. So it's good to stay friends with the government and to make sure they don't get infiltrated, which we'll talk about soon. And then there's a whole bunch of extra factions. They control all kinds of stuff. Marsec is like, I think it's the closest thing to a military. It's basically the Mars security force, and they basically handle all the manufacturing of like military vehicles and stuff. It's the closest thing they've got to a military, and it's maybe more of a manufacturing, but still, they are difficult to keep friendly because there's some inter-faction politics. So Megapol is always hostile with Marsec for some, I'm sure you could read the lore, some reason. Jump to Marsec, you can do stuff like that. So because they're always opposed to each other, we're almost guaranteed to become friendly with Megapol just by killing aliens, which means Marsec will be mad at us and they'll eventually go down the marks. Once they get to hostile, they'll stop selling you stuff, which is actually a problem. On the other hand, there is always the option, you click this little hand button, you can pay them money to increase their friendliness with you. If you can get them to allied, either through money or through like doing favors for them, like attacking someone that they're at war with, I think they stay allied once they're allied, but I didn't really try it much in my test game. It's pretty expensive. Like, I don't have a lot of money to throw around. Anyway, I try to keep them out of hostile, except Sirius where possible. There's one, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but not general. Transstellar, I think. They're like the trade company. They are the transit company. They cover like the taxis, they do the road repairs and the tube repairs and the interplanetary trade. They like the aliens for some reason, and the trouble is, I'm sure there's an in-lore reason. It's fine. They also don't like Megapol, so once you're friends with Megapol, they don't like you either. And the problem is like they run the taxis, so when you recruit somebody, like a new scientist, they generally take a taxi from a building to your base. Once Transstellar hates you, they can't take a taxi. They'll refuse service, and it can become very difficult to operate your bases. So at some point, we'll probably have to pay them off a bit, just to keep things running. But they won't go to hostile immediately, so that's something for later on. And it's like most things have something they do. Like I don't know everything perfectly, but like some of these factions are more important than others. Some of them are for gear, some of them are for travel, some of them are for like recruiting people. Like one of them is like there's like an android faction, like they're basically robots. One of the factions here is the one that builds them, and you need them. I can't remember which one it is. It's like cyberware, or Diablo is like the hybrids, which is another species. But one of these, and Mutants Alliance, they like the hybrids as well, I think. There's a couple that like that. I think Self actually is the cyborg one. So if you can get Self friendlier, then you can recruit androids, which are pretty cool. I believe so. Yeah, the artificial life form. So that's the right one. So making friends with them actually has some advantages for recruiting agents. Some of them have less value, some of them have more. Gravball League, I think, gives you better than average human agents, because they're like sports players and stuff. And some of them just don't really do anything. But yeah, that's kind of all the factions. Again, it gets really complicated, so I'm not going to cover every little detail today, but that's kind of the basics of how I'm going to work with them. On the left here, there's a couple buttons. That's just your map modes, toggles it out. I like to press tab, though, to save a little bit of time. This is your follow mode, basically. So if you've got a car selected, double click to jump to, I think camera will, if you select it, it'll follow them around, I think. Yeah, it just disables, yeah, that's just follow, basically. Let's see, we've got Alien Infiltration tab. This should be nothing to start, but you can see for any given faction, sort of a percentage of how infiltrated they are. If it hits the line, they're considered, I think, permanently controlled by aliens, which is very bad. If we do our job, it won't go up, or it'll go up and go back down. And this is a nice shortcut here that just shows you anything that the game thinks is infiltrated. It doesn't necessarily catch everything 100%, but if you see, you click this and you're like, oh, there's like 5 factions listed. Then it's time to go, all right, what are those factions? Like if it said Megapole was infiltrated, it'd be like, all right, well, we might want to check some Megapole buildings and see if we can find some aliens. If you knew that, like, say that aliens landed and you knew they landed some troops nearby in this kind of area, and then the graph said Megapole was infiltrated, you'd be like, well, I bet you this building has some aliens in it, and you'd go there. Now, we might have to do a little bit of save scumming, because if you go to the wrong building and look for aliens and they're not there, then you get a big relations hit, which is kind of unfair. I mean, I understand, but it can be really hard to keep the alien infiltration under control if you just always wait until someone says, hey, there's aliens here. If you wait until they say this building's been infiltrated, they're probably also in all the buildings around them, especially on the higher difficulties. So there's going to be a little bit of fiddling around trying to make sure we clear stuff out before it gets too bad. This is just your performance. It just gives you a score. If your score is good, you get more income at the end of the week. Everything goes by the week for this game rather than month. Like the older games tended to be income every month. This game's every week. The time's a bit sped up for that. And if you get negative scores, you'll lose funding. And if it gets really negative, I don't think you'll lose the game straight out. I think it's just the government is like, that's it, we're done, and we're not friends anymore. And you can never recover that. And you can see all your expenses and stuff. That's pretty standard for these kinds of games. I think the only way to lose is to actually lose your last base. So unless this base gets blown up or attacked and all the soldiers killed, I don't think you get a game over screen. I've never seen it, but I think that's the way to get it. And that's the performance log. So there's the Ufopaedia. This is actually pretty good for a game of its era. It actually has a pretty good amount of information, and you can skip through it all and read all kinds of stuff if you want. I probably won't spend a lot of time here because you can get to most of these screens, or you can get the basic information somewhere else, but it's definitely nice to have a place where you can look up some in-depth information. And then typical stuff, pause the game, play. This is slow speed, normal speed, double speed, quadruple speed. Basically, nothing really will happen on double speed. Like, this is good for moving soldiers around and stuff. But events take place in ultra speed, basically. So, alien attacks and research and days passage. Because ultra speed will basically mean the hours will tick up. If you're going, even at quad speed, second by second, you could watch this like real time, like me here playing. I could leave it like this for probably hours and nothing would happen. So, well, maybe not hours, but definitely minutes and nothing would happen. So you're going to have to use ultra speed to really get to the next interesting event. This kind of stuff, that doesn't count. Seriously, it doesn't count. I'll probably turn those messages off soon enough. The only other thing I haven't showed you is the event log, and this will just show you, vehicles destroyed, your vehicles damaged, UFOs blown up, that kind of stuff. Pretty standard. And this is just center, which shows you where the vehicle was destroyed from the last event. Okay, so that's all the main menu stuff. Hopefully that clears up the general navigation, because when I'm playing the game, obviously I'll just be clicking on a building, clicking attack, and going over here. I'll be playing quicker than this, so I figure this is a good way to make sure you guys are kind of understanding what's going on. So then the next big step is some of the base management stuff. So I talked about like the basic base layout. You can have more than one base, as you may guess. It looks like 8 maximum. I don't think we'll ever build 8 bases. My plan will be to build 2, maybe 3, but that's probably it, because it's, as much as it's nice to have more space, it gets really hectic transferring stuff back and forth and making sure they all have defenses and they all have, they all need living quarters and stores and all that. It just, it becomes micromanagement hell. But we'll want to have a couple at least. And I think this is essentially what the tactical map would look like if this was combat. I think. No, this is the city map. This is where you are in the city. That's right. That's just a mini map of the city, because if you look at it like this, our base is on the left side and then slums are in the middle. So that's just showing you in a not totally helpful way, but where your base is. Bases closer to the center of the map are nice because if the aliens attack, you don't have to fly across the entire city to get there. So that's something to factor in. Alright, so let's go through these tabs, and that'll probably be it. Obviously, you've got your total money. That's pretty standard stuff. This is your hiring and firing screen. So unfortunately, there's no new soldiers or agents to recruit. It would have been nice if they had a couple here to show it off. But you can see all the agents we've currently got. These are all humans. There are 3 different races. There's humans, hybrids, which are human sectoids. Keeping in mind this is the timeline where we dealt with sectoids like 150 years ago. Some of them, I don't know exactly why, but some of them like fled to Earth and sort of integrated. And now we've got human sectoid hybrid scum. They're basically the way their stats work are. I can't really mouse over from this screen. Let me just because I'm talking about them. Let's go to the agent screen to show. So the hybrids will have weaker, on average, to start especially. They'll have weaker health, accuracy, reaction, speed, stamina, Actually, bravery doesn't really matter. It's probably the same approximately. And their strength is specifically really bad. So health and strength especially get a big hit, and some of the other stats are just weaker than humans on average. But there are best bet for psionics. They generally start reasonably good on psionics, and you can definitely train them up to be the best psi soldiers you're going to get. The thing is, early game, they're not particularly good because their stats start bad. You can eventually train them up to have maximum psi stats and maximum battle stats. I generally am not too impressed because psionics aren't that powerful in this game, and a lot of enemies are just straight up immune to it. Like, oh man, I think there's only 2 enemy types that are even susceptible to psionics, and both of them are at least moderately resistant. And I think most of the other enemy sort of classes are just completely immune. So it's not great. It has some uses, obviously, but it takes a lot of investment. You need hybrids, and you need to put them in a psi lab for a couple weeks so that their stats are good enough to do something. And then, imagine a human, a normal human, if they'd spent 2 weeks in the normal gym, they'd have, more strength, speed, accuracy, and everything. The hybrids have to get their psi stats up and then train in a normal gym to get even acceptable levels of health and accuracy and stuff. You can't just ignore their other stats, or else their speed will be terribly low and their strength will be terribly low. And even though they're good at psionics, as much as that helps, they won't be able to move very far or carry very much or hit anything with their gun, which you'd still prefer. So hybrids, I'm not a huge fan of, but if you're playing a really long game, you can eventually get them to be the strongest character, but it takes forever. And then the last class is the cyborgs, and they tend to have really good starting stats, especially strength and health. Often other stats as well, very high. They have no psionic attack capability, but they have maxed out psi defense. So they're immune to enemy psionics, and they generally have really good starting stats for pretty much everything, but especially strength, health, and accuracy. They're built to be a combat unit. Unfortunately, they don't grow. You can't send them to combat training and gain stats. They don't gain promotion type stuff. I guess they get promoted probably, but they don't gain improvement from doing missions and killing stuff and training. So that's kind of later on. They get outclassed by humans that have spent a lot of time training, but they're always nice to recruit because they're good as soon as you recruit them. So that's kind of the main thing for those. Anyway, there aren't any to show off at the moment. And then, of course, each one takes a living space slot, so you got to make sure you don't run out of space. Scientists this time around aren't just unnamed nobodies. They all get a name and a sort of skill. So they're separate for, quantum physicists can't research biology. It's one or the other, and they can't craft. So they're all 3 separate sort of classes. And each of them has, I can't mouse over it, but you can see on the bottom left there, they have an inherent skill for this job. It goes from... I actually don't know what the minimum is, but the maximum is 100. I assume the minimum is maybe 50 or 60. I'm not sure if I've seen anyone lower than 60. I think 60 is around the lowest I've seen, and 100 is definitely the max. But that score directly affects how quickly they will research, which we'll get to that screen in a second. So a lot of the times we'll be checking, if I was playing this game, this is a really good person, we would definitely want to recruit Sylvie. 100 skill in biochemistry is perfect, so always pick those people up. and fire whoever's the worst. So she would replace Helga, no problem. And that would give us a 31-point swing, which would help us research faster. That's pretty good. You can only put 5 maximum per lab right now. So there's no point having an extra 6th person really right now. So we would fire 1 and just keep 5 people researching. Although, if you really min-max, you'd hold on to her until Sylvia arrives and then switch yada 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 micromanagement. But you know, it's fine. I think actually research only progresses at the end of the hour. So if you can do a bunch of hiring and firing before, you know, 59:59, like before 1:59:59, then you probably don't lose anything. But again, I might be off. Anyway, quantum physics works the same way. We just don't have anyone you can see to recruit. And engineering works the same way, except it's crafting speed rather than research speed. Again, a 99 is a really good start. We would definitely replace one of the 61s, and that would be a significant improvement. And you do pay a little bit of money, although it's not very much to do stuff like that. Okay, and it also takes a second, just to show that off. Those 2 new recruits, we can find them here. So this is one of them, if I turn the speed back on. He has to actually travel to the base. You can see him in a taxi there. And once he gets to base, then you can actually assign him. That's why I said if Transstellar hates you, he wouldn't be able to take that taxi. So that's kind of how it works. It's when you buy and purchase like gear, it works the same way, except they might come in a hover bike instead of a taxi cab, like a flying vehicle rather than a road vehicle. All right, let's keep going here before the video's super long. So that's all the recruiting, firing screen. Not too complicated. If you want to hire to a specific base, you know, if you had base 2, you'd click it and it would go there instead. You get the same pool of civilians every day it resets. So especially the early game, every night at 12 o'clock, I'll be checking to see if there's any new recruits that are worth hiring. That'll be definitely an early game priority. So that sort of explains why I'll be checking that screen so often. This is our buying and sell gear screen, and there's a fair few things to show off here. So it's separated into 4 tabs. This is vehicle tab. This is actually buying full-on vehicles. This is gear for your agents, so agent equipment. This is equipment for your air vehicles and equipment for your road vehicles, which we won't be using really, but I'll explain that in a bit. Although there is some overlap between these two, like you can see light weapon control is in both categories, but not the weapons, for instance. So you can't put this laser gun on a road vehicle, and you can't put this turret on an air vehicle. So I don't actually know very much about road vehicles, because driving on the road is not very good. I haven't actually tested out most of this stuff, even though maybe they have a purpose. But I find driving, like the road vehicles are just not good enough. So if the road gets destroyed and your vehicle is on it, they get destroyed. And the roads blow up very, very easily. So if the UFO is shooting at your let's see something here, like if they're shooting at your APC and they miss and they hit the bridge they're on or something, then it's just dead. It doesn't. Don't worry about that. 550 Constitution is its hit points basically, and lots of armor. This is a tanky looking thing, but if it's driving on a bridge, the bridge gets blown up, it's gone. So that's a big negative. Plus, you can't take a road everywhere. Like if you shoot a UFO down, it's generally in a field somewhere. These guys can't actually go there, so you have to use like a flyer to get there. So generally, for a variety of reasons, I don't think they're very good. Anyway, so actual vehicles, I don't know if, I'm certainly no expert. Valkyrie interceptors are your standard kind of Sky Ranger flying type ship. They're expensive and heavy and not super fast, but they can carry a fair bit of stuff. They're your best troop transport early on, so you'll definitely want one of these. Hover bikes are small and nimble. They're much cheaper. They don't hold very much stuff, but they're pretty fast. Phoenix hover cars are your kind of mid-range sort of. They're not very sturdy. They're nowhere. In fact, they're nothing compared to a Valkyrie, but they get a couple weapons and stuff, so it helps. I generally didn't use very many of them when I played. They're still pretty expensive. Hover bikes I found were far more useful because they were cheap and fast, and then you want a couple Valkyries for carrying people around. And then the rest of the stuff below is, I think, road vehicles, actually. At the bottom, these are the named ones that we can name, and we can sell them back. So there's only down to the Griffin AFV of actual vehicles. So I guess we start with like 3 flying vehicles and then 4 road vehicles. I haven't really used any of these, so I can't really speak for them, other than the couple I tried that you start with were terrible, and then I read about it and they're not good. So that's about it. One thing of note here is this is the company that sells them, so if Marsec hates you, you won't be allowed to buy one like that until you make them happy again. So it's good to pay attention to who builds what. Eventually we'll be building our own, but that's a fair ways off. Alright, so that's sort of basic vehicles. I'm not going to go through all the equipment, obviously. You can see the starting equipment. Again, we'll be crafting our own eventually, but to start with you have to just buy stuff. There's a limited pool of like purchasable equipment. It will change on the weekly cycle. So once a week, new gear will be added, and some will be removed as well. If you've sold a bunch of stuff at the end of the week, some of it will be sort of distributed. And if you've bought all of it, all of the law pistols, for instance, you can recover a few. For the most part, the first 3 grenades are quite useful. They each have a good reason to have them. I never found a great use for the heavy explosive. Or the high explosive. It's heavy. You can see the weight there. So I didn't like weighing down my soldiers with it, and I found the AP grenades were good enough. Law pistols are one-handed, kind of terrible pistol weapons. I think they're probably not worth it. The machine guns are amazing. We'll be using them a ton. You know how in like the original XCOM game, the time units it took to fire your weapon was like 1% of your total, depending on like a snapshot or a automatic shot or an aim shot. That's how Xenonauts does it. That's how most of the classic XCOMs do it. It's still like that in Apocalypse, except that the auto fire for machine guns is basically just 1 time unit. Now, it's not very accurate, but if you can move one of your agents next to an enemy and still have even 5 or 10 time units left, which isn't much, and usually it wouldn't even be enough to shoot a weapon otherwise, but if you've got a machine gun, you can get up point blank and just ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, 10 shots at point blank will still probably hit most of them, and it's just, even if it doesn't do a ton of damage, you know, it's got a, where does it say its power? Power of 21 is quite low, and its accuracy is pretty bad. Armor piercing doesn't mean a whole lot, it just means it's not energy, basically. It's not explosive, it's not fire, it's not energy, it's not something else, it's just a standard regular attack. It shoots fast, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, they're a really good early game weapon, so we'll be relying on them heavily. We will not be relying on law pistols. Laser sniper gun I did not find terribly amazing. You can see it stacks there. It's much more accurate. It's clearly meant to be your long range weapon, but it doesn't do enough damage. It's slightly more than 1 bullet from a machine gun, and it's lasers. Now, there's a few sections where having a laser damage type is definitely better than a normal ballistic damage type, but generally it doesn't matter, and you're not going to get a lot of shots per round, and they're not going to do much damage. So other than like, I can only think of 1 enemy really, and it doesn't start at the beginning of the game. It's something that we'll see soon enough, but other than that 1 enemy type, and if you've played Apocalypse, you probably know what I'm talking about, I don't see the purpose of the laser sniper gun for anything except that, and even then you don't need it. Let's see, the autocannon. This guy is definitely one of the big good weapons early on. It's heavy, it's big, it's two-handed, of course. Everything is basically two-handed except for the law pistol, by the way. But you can use different types of ammo, which is cool. So you've got normal damage, which is like the same as the machine gun, basically, except it does more damage per hit. It's a bigger armor-piercing round, which is definitely good for certain enemies. It's not particularly accurate, it doesn't shoot specifically fast, so you probably want, if you want to use armor piercing, you need an agent that's got a reasonably good accuracy stat. If it was just the AP, I would say the autocannon wasn't very good though, because this on its own is not that great, compared to the machine gun and other weapons. But the high explosive one, whoo boy. So this guy is basically a small grenade. Well, it's not even nearly the size of a grenade, but it's an explosive. It has like an area of effect after you shoot, so even if you miss, you can still hit the enemy with explosive type damage. This can also blow up all kinds of stuff. So if you're on a base, if you're on a mission, and you're at Marsec's building, you'll blow up all their stuff and they'll get mad at you. So you gotta be a little bit careful where you use it. It's great for fighting UFOs and alien, like, if you're attacking the Cult of Sirius where you don't care about blowing it up, great weapon. If you're attacking a UFO and you don't care about blowing stuff up, great weapon. It's a little bit more cautious when you're at an allied base. But yeah, this thing is great, and sometimes we'll find enemies that are really grouped up tightly, and a couple HE shots will clear them like nothing. It also has incendiary rounds. It basically lights stuff on fire. I wasn't a huge fan. Like, I don't know. I never really found a great use for it. Most of the time when you're defending an ally's base, or someone you don't want to tick off at least, you probably don't want to light the whole place on fire. So I generally don't use it very often. I find for cover like that, I'd rather use a stun grenade or a smoke grenade. Stun leaves gas that will hopefully turn enemies unconscious. Smoke impedes vision, so they might not see you. Just lighting everything on fire, though, your guys don't take too much damage from fire, so it is more effective on the enemies than your own guys, but I haven't found it to be terribly useful. Stun grapple is like a stun rod, basically. It's got a really short range and does stun damage, although quite a lot of stun damage. Like 90 power is pretty high, but it's got a really short range and it doesn't fire very often. It's not even particularly accurate, I don't think. Actually, it is quite accurate. It's just really, really short range. So, definitely something we'll need to bring, and we'll want quite a few of them. Because it does stun damage, it might be effective against certain enemies that are stronger against ballistics or lasers, but I don't really know those kind of stats very well, so oftentimes I'm only going to use this if I'm trying to capture something. Mindbender is what allows your psionic troops to do psionic attacks, so you need it for that. Medikits heal your guys, obviously. You can only heal, like, critically damaged wounds. You can't really heal, like, if you have 50 health and you take 20 damage, you can't just heal it up, like some games. It's like, you just took 20 damage, you're just going to be injured. But if your arm is critically injured, you took a critical hit to your arm or something, you can use medkits to repair it. And if you don't, they take, like, bleed damage every turn. So that's the main purpose there. Motion scanners I've yet to really figure out. I assume somehow they help give you an idea of where the enemies are. I tried it a couple times and I couldn't really figure it out, but we'll try it again for the Let's Play. This is going on much longer than I was expecting, but enjoy! Incendiary grenades I never really used for the same reason I didn't use incendiary cannon ammo. It just lights everything on fire. Apparently one of the slum gangs, they really like it, but I don't even think I saw an enemy use it, so that's something I'm not familiar with. And then there's a bunch of armor. The armor you start with is actually quite good. It gives you quite a lot of protection. So as long as you can buy the basic tier 1 armor, your guys are, unlike a lot of XCOM games, actually pretty strong. When we're fighting like enemy human agents early on, like if they're using law pistols and machine guns, they probably can't even really hurt us. This stuff is like really good. Now it's not great against some of the more advanced alien weapons like disruptors and stuff. But early on, it's pretty solid, so definitely recommend using it. Even though it's heavy, like, the only downside is it's heavy. And if you have a hybrid, they can probably barely move in this stuff. So that's kind of the weakness. Once some time passes, we get to, like, week 1, week 2, week 3, more stuff will be sold. We'll have, like, tier 2 armor available for purchase. Maybe a couple other weapons, a couple different vehicles will show up. That kind of stuff. But this is the basic stuff anyway, and then we'll craft more later on, obviously. And then, like, for the vehicles, it's a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to get into it right now too much. Weapons control give you accuracy, but I think only for guided weapons like missiles. I was looking into it a little bit. I don't think they're very good. They're cheap, so it's not too expensive to throw a couple on. But I don't think they affect, like, laser shots. Like, they've only got 60% accuracy, but I kind of have a feeling they're not affected by the weapons control, although I could be wrong. But anyway, that's kind of how it is. So, these sorts of weapons, they all have a size. This is a 1x3 weapon. This is a 1x4 weapon, so a 4-size rectangle. We'll see that when we look at the ships, sort of how big they are and where they'll fit. Then sometimes you need ammo, so lasers don't use ammo. Render plasma gun uses Elerium. Lineage plasma cannon uses Elerium. The lineage cannon is much better than the render plasma gun. Yeah, I'd say much better. A lot larger range, more ammo, more accuracy, more damage by a little bit. And it uses the same ammo, but they don't sell any right now. There's none available. So, if you like this one, and assuming you can fit the same size in, if it fits in the same spot, It's probably good to upgrade to those eventually. This thing is more like... I've never used this one. It's a turret that fires quickly. I figured because your Illyrium is kind of limited, I found a lower damage rapid fire plasma weapon probably not a great idea. I focused more on the lower fire accurate high damage plasma because I didn't want to waste the Illyrium. This stuff is mined on Mars, I believe. That's why you don't get so much of it. Autocannons I found are pretty terrible. It's just a ballistic weapon that you start with. I found it's not very good at shooting down UFOs. Missiles are pretty good though. Janitor missiles are like your standard cheap mid-range missiles. They're pretty. We'll probably use lots of those. Justice Launcher is like a one-shot. You equip it, it shoots one, and then you have to go back to base. It's super long range, but I never thought it was worth the micromanagement because you have to put it on a ship, have them pop out of the base, shoot at a UFO, and then dock, and then get rearmed, which takes a little bit of time. Pop out of the base, shoot a missile, then dock and rearm. That just felt like too much pain, too much of a mess. In 50 damage, right? Like, think about it this way. Even if it hits, and like it might miss, but say it hits, 50 damage. Well, that's, 2.5 janitor missiles. I bet you could shoot 2 janitor missiles in the time it takes you to reload one of these. So, I didn't think it was probably not worth it. Prophet missiles are a lot like janitor, but you only get 8. Again, I don't think they're terribly good. It's because janitors you get 24 rounds, so you could use them for an extended combat round. Prophets do a tiny bit more damage, and they're more accurate, they're actually the same. So I don't know why you'd care. It's a bit longer range, but you only get a third of the total ammo before you have to go reload. I don't see how that's terribly valuable personally, but again, maybe you'll find a better use for it than I can think. So those are Prophets. Retribution is like the Justice one, where it's just one single shot. I guess it does a little bit more damage. It's probably I think the Prophets are supposed to be upgrades to Janitors. I just don't think they really are a big enough upgrade. And I think the Retribution are probably supposed to be upgrades to Justice. But, 68 damage versus 58, that's an upgrade, but it's still just one shot, then go back to base. I don't know. I never really use stuff like that much. There's also some defense arrays. I think the idea with this is it's point defense that will shoot down enemy missiles. I've never used them. I've never had a problem really with my vehicles getting destroyed, but maybe on Superhuman I'll try out a couple. We'll see. And then these are like your engines, so when you buy a vehicle, it comes with an engine. They mostly just affect your top speed, which is pretty important, so I generally try to buy the best engine I can afford, and then of course they also use fuel. Fuel's cheap though, it's not a big deal to keep them running, so you don't want to waste fuel by having them fly around the city forever, but Anyway, that's all that stuff. That took a long time. If you have 2 bases, you can move stuff, no big deal. I've already talked about all the equipment. One thing that's handy is in battle, you can move equipment between slots for no time units. Although it costs you, if you drop it on the ground, it'll cost you some time units to pick up. But otherwise, you can move stuff to your backpack, you can switch it between hands, no problem. One thing that you might want to notice is if you use a 2-handed weapon and you have something in your offhand, you do get reduced accuracy. But there's really, because the time units, you don't pay any time units, there's no reason not to clear your hand and shoot with 2 hands and get better accuracy, because it's just a little bit of micromanagement, but it gives you better shot percentage, basically. Other than that, there's not much to talk about. You've got equipment screen and armor screen, so it just shows you all your armor there, and it'll show you everything else there. No big deal. Alright, that one's done, nice and easy. So vehicles, again, I already sort of covered most of the stuff, but you've got weapon slots. I can't change this guy because he's out partying. But yeah, normally you've got a couple weapon slots where you can equip, 1x3. So these 1x4 weapons won't fit there, pretty obvious. And you can switch around. Once you've equipped them, if you mouse over, it'll show you their ammo. If you've ran out of janitor missiles, it'll say 10 out of 24 or 0 out of 24. So then it's not going to work. And then you've got your engine, which depending on the vehicle has different size slots. So this guy can hold a 4x4. The little hover bikes hold a 2x2. These guys can hold 2x4s if those even exist. I'm not even sure they do, honestly. And then there's a passive inventory slot, or miscellaneous, which is this selection. So this is a passenger module, which lets you carry more troops. This is a cargo module that lets you carry gear back. And eventually we'll need an alien biotransport module that will carry alien corpses and stuff. So that's kind of a standard loadout there. No big deal. It's pretty obvious, right? Like, I don't have to go over this too much more. The reason we like the Valkyries is we can equip some miscellaneous slots. The other vehicles have a much harder time carrying stuff around. Oh, good. We're almost there. Research. So you have to assign your scientists to the lab. Now they're assigned. It shows you their total skill, and you assign them a research project. There's no manufacturing jobs ready at the workshop. I don't know how to build anything yet. Quantum physics, I'd assign everybody like that. I'd go, hey, let's learn about the dimension gates. That sounds important. You'd assign them, and based on their skill, they'll research it over the next probably couple days. And then it's the same thing for biology. We need to research how to carry corpses around, so let's get that going. Pretty straightforward. You can cancel projects. If you've got multiple bases, I think they don't share research, so having two bases research the same thing doesn't work, I'm pretty sure. But you can have two bases researching different things, works just fine, or two different labs. You can have one base with a couple labs both working on different things. That's pretty common. And then if you have aliens in containment, you can see what you've got and burn them if you need to. And I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, ended up taking an hour, but it's a pretty thorough introduction. The only thing I didn't talk about at all would be the battles screen. So let me just load up one of my old saves, just to show you a little bit about this. I don't want to go too far in depth here, but just so it's familiar for when we get to it in game. Oh, there's like a spoiler. Yeah, let's just show that off. In fact, I know why I saved it there now that I'm thinking about it. I want to find something that's not, one enemy left. Well, this is the beginning of a mission anyway. So just to go over a couple things here, just to make sure it's understandable when we get to the real game. These are your squads. So I've got 6 different squads on this mission with 4 soldiers each. We can select groups of 4 at a time and control them as a group. Or over here, we can select them individually. Well, you have to click them, but you can move them individually as well. As a group, you can also shoot all together. I hold shift to just manually target, and they all shoot at the same time, which is pretty cool. Over here is your reserves for reaction fire, basically. And that's the end turn button, so be careful with that. But if you want to... I don't really use it very often, but if you want to make sure that they've got enough time units left to take, say, an aim shot, you click there. And if you want to make sure they can kneel, you click both of them. And then when we move them, they won't spend their time units... Like, you can see the little number above their head. They won't go past whatever's required for a kneeling time unit shot, so that they've all stopped moving with, a few time units ready to go. It depends on the weapon equipped. Some weapons can fire much quicker than others. These little guns shoot really quickly, so they don't need very many time units. If you're using something bigger, I'm sure someone's got a bigger gun, yeah, like that guy. They would need to reserve more time units to take an aim shot. Like, this is your automatic reaction fire control. Over here is your what's it called? This is if you want to take a shot. So like, if I'm moving this guy, and I've actually got flying suits, of course. It's the end of the game. Of course you've got flying suits. So you can use... I use page up and down to move up and down. You can use these buttons. Pretty obvious, I think, hopefully. This is like snapshot, auto shot, aim shot, and if you look at this little bar here underneath the weapon, it'll show you how approximately accurate it will be with the different shots. My characters are all probably really good stats. I don't know if I can actually... Yeah, you can pull it up here. Yeah, I mean, I've got an accuracy of 87, so it's not a huge surprise that even my auto shot is pretty darn accurate. Normally, early on in the game, it wouldn't work like that. Also, just to demonstrate, if you notice here, it's like maybe 75% up. That's because this is a two-handed weapon. If I remove one, it should have gone up a little bit. Now, I don't know how much of a difference it makes exactly. It might be like 10%, it might be 20%, but that gives you a slightly better shot. So the maximum is a two-handed, like no interference aim shot, and it's pretty darn likely I'll hit whatever I'm shooting at this point, which is... Yeah. On the other hand, it uses a lot of time units to do that. So this is 35 time units per shot, and we could basically take 2 shots like that. It would take 8 time units to take an auto fire. Now, if you're using those little guns, the little guns are a lot like what the machine guns will be like later on for us. So an auto fire with this guy with the little gun is only 1 time unit. Yeah, so we can shoot a lot. And we'll talk about that little gun later on when we get it, but it's pretty darn good. And then I think this is no shot if you just want to force your guys not to shoot. Now, you can still manually shoot if you want. I don't know, probably just use an auto fire or something. But if you don't want them to shoot at the end of turn, this will stop them from doing friendly fire and all that, I think. This is drop, so you can, if you've got an equipped item, you can drop it for no time units for either hand. And you can also throw your objects. So there are opportunities to throw a grenade, like prime a grenade so it explodes at the end of your turn. Throw a grenade to one of your other units. They can pick it up for a couple time units. They can throw it again. You can do all that kind of cool stuff. This will show you the type of damage. So it'll say explosive or armor piercing or whatever. So if you're wondering what kind of damage an equipped weapon does, just pay attention to the little symbol there. Where's one of those big cannons? Yeah, this guy does energy damage, whatever they call it. So it's a little beam. And then this is your inventory. Just a shortcut to here. Pretty standard. Oh, I forgot to show you this screen too. That's just your medals they've earned, how many stats have improved, how many missions they've been on, all that cool stuff. That's why we want to recruit some named soldiers. We've got some commands for kneeling. If you kneel, your accuracy goes up a little bit. And I think it's not really evasion, but it makes it a little bit harder for the enemies to target you. Not significantly, though, but a little bit. And the other thing that's useful about kneeling is, for instance, if I want like a shooting line, like if I end my turn or if I've got a bunch of enemies, if you're standing, you can shoot over someone who's kneeling without any risk of shooting them. Unless maybe you're shooting downwards too much. I don't know. I'm not sure if... Like, if you're shooting down for the Z levels, you might still hit someone who's crouching, maybe, but I haven't seen that happen. Point is, if a front row is crouching, the back row should be able to shoot over their heads, which is handy. What's this? Group formation, single file. Oh, that's just for how they move. I don't really use stuff like that very often. Technically, I play the game in turn-based mode. You can also play it in not turn-based mode, where everything moves sort of like real time, and it's kind of crazy actually, but that's another option. But yeah, single file should change them to move, you know, single file like this, which kind of makes sense. I don't use that very often. I like to stay as a squad group movement, which keeps them together. But that, you know, it's options. I haven't actually used assign unit to squad. I wonder if, like... Yeah, you can basically move them between squads if you want. I think the maximum is still 6 per squad, but maybe not. I don't really use stuff like that very often, so it's no big deal. So technically, you can also have your units crawl, basically take the prone position. I don't use this very often. It's really bad for moving. I assume it's a little bit more accurate than kneeling, maybe? Yeah, it did add a little bit. I don't usually care that much about that tiny little bit of accuracy. It's probably also slightly harder to get hit like that, but unless I'm in a really bad situation, I probably won't worry about crawling. Normal speed is convenient for one thing and one thing only, preserving your stamina. Your stamina will go down as you run and take actions. It's also there's kind of a function for stamina based on your strength and how much equipment you've got equipped. So if you've got high strength and nothing very heavy equipped, it sure shows you your max time units. Maybe not on this screen. Again, we're getting in depth here. It doesn't really matter, but your time units, your maximum time units, are decreased by the weight of your equipment compared against your strength. So if you've got a really high strength, you can carry a bunch of stuff. If you've got low strength and a bunch of heavy stuff, you'll lose time units. And I think your fatigue also goes up quicker. So if you're worried about your fatigue, once your fatigue gets too low, your stamina, I guess that is the word. Once your stamina is out, you can't run, which is what you generally want to do, because running is what lets you move at a good speed. It's like maybe 2 time units or so per square. So if you're running, you can move around pretty fast, and if you run out of stamina, then you can't do that anymore. Hopefully that explains it. The last little button here is your aggressiveness. If you're playing on real time, this is much more important. If you're playing on turn-based, I think all it affects is your reaction AI. So I pretty much always leave it on aggressive, because if I leave a bunch of soldiers, like, I'll just pick a new group over here. If I leave a bunch of dudes at, say, right here, I save some time units or whatever, I put them here, and then I hit end turn. I want them to be ready, like I press right click to have them face a direction. I want them ready to shoot, so I might not even hit reserve time units or reserve time units for shots. But I say, like, I want you guys to do aim shots or something, just wait there, and if they see an enemy, they'll shoot them. If you leave it at cautious, they will sometimes shoot, but sometimes they'll take cover, and they'll waste their time units, their 23 precious time units, moving behind some grass or something instead of shooting the enemy. And if you put them on safe mode, they will never shoot and they will always run away with whatever time units left. So aggressive is generally how I play with that, just because I want them to take, you know, reaction shots, overwatches. And that's it, I hope. You can see there's the map mode for this as well. You can actually remove some of the background images if you want, just to... If someone's hiding behind a building, some of these options make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. The briefing will generally tell you what your objective are. This is some spoilers, by the way. But you know how it is. And again, we've got a log of what you've done, so that's pretty standard. Alright, well hopefully that covers all the basic stuff. Feel free to leave questions below this video if there's something that I didn't explain very well. I think this is actually the city map for my original game. This is a medium-sized city map, so you can see it's a little bit smaller than the one I was showing off at the beginning of the video. And this is just a picture of what it looks like later game when you've built up a big base and you've got all kinds of stuff and you got tons and tons of soldiers and all kinds of fancy gear and stuff that you guys won't know anything about if you've never played, but we've got all kinds of cool stuff. You know how it is. It's XCOM. That's how it works. Alright, so yeah. Feel free to leave questions if you think of anything that I didn't explain well enough. And once again, please leave names, right? Yeah, don't forget to leave your name if you would like to join the squad. So I'm going to leave this video up for maybe 2 or 3 days or somewhere around there until we've got, hopefully, maybe a couple dozen names, give or take, and then we'll start playing, and it should be fun. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys are excited. Playing an old game, and just because I explain things in this video doesn't mean I'll skip over it all in the next one, but you know, I feel like hopefully that's enough to catch you guys up a little bit, and then when we get to the actual episode 1, we'll just jump right in there and start killing aliens. Alright folks, thanks for watching. Hope you have enjoyed, and I will see you next time for proper episode 1. See you there.